The weather reports were saying they're expecting 100-mile-an-hour winds and 60-foot seas. We're going up and down waves that look like they're as big as mountains. The rudder and propeller keep coming out of the water. You're in a situation that you can't control. You have to make difficult decisions when you don't like any of your options. Hope is not a method. You have to understand what risks you're willing to accept and be satisfied you have a plan to overcome those risks.
Showing courage under pressure is a hallmark of great leadership, especially in the most daunting situations. Today, we're honored to have Captain Larry Brudnicki with us, a man who has demonstrated this quality throughout his remarkable career. Captain Brudnicki is a celebrated Coast Guard officer who led his crew through treacherous conditions of the perfect storm, displaying incredible bravery and determination. Beyond this legendary event, he has successfully managed numerous high-risk missions, showcasing outstanding leadership and strategic skill. Now, Larry uses his wealth of experience to inspire corporations worldwide, delivering impactful messages on leadership, teamwork, and risk management. Larry, I'm so honored to have you here on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, as our listeners begin tracking their walk using the Strava app, I'd love to know there's a lot of different ways that courage is defined, along with a number of misconceptions as well. How would you personally define what courage is?
Well, I think you're right. There are a lot of ways to define courage, and some of them don't quite capture it. I mean, this has been debated from the ancient Greek philosophers right down to motivational posters on office buildings. I mean, if you go to the dictionary, it's just going to say it's doing something that's difficult or dangerous without fear. I saw one of those motivational posters, and it says, "Courage is not the absence of fear; it's the conquest of it." Now, we can go back to the 4th century BC and see what Aristotle had to say. And I think he gives a very good description of what courage is not, which I think is interesting. If you're forced to do something and you're only doing it out of fear for what's going to happen to you, that isn't courage. That's self-preservation. If what you're going to do is you're very cocky and overconfident about what you're doing, that's false courage. And if you're just going to do something because you fail to recognize the danger, that's not courage, that's ignorance. So I think that's pretty good definitions of what courage isn't. And I'm not going to say I've cornered the market on what courage is, and no one has knocked on my door asking for my thoughts on what the next motivational poster ought to be. But I think it goes along the lines of you're doing something that you know is right just because it's right. And there are consequences to doing it. And it could be physical. You could end up dying trying to do this. It could be something where you may be on, say, the right side of the issue, but you're on the wrong side of the cancel culture, and you're going to do it anyway. And it could be something, even on the emotional level, where you know it's the right thing to do, but this could haunt you for the rest of your life. And I think a lot of veterans have faced that. So I guess when I put it all together, I'd say courage is doing what is right just because it's right, even though you know that there are going to be personal consequences, whether you succeed or don't succeed. That would be my definition.
That's a terrific definition. And I know when I was younger and early in my life, and especially my naval career heading off to war, I wouldn't say that I had courage. I had a special level of ignorance into what I was stepping into. And I know a lot of young veterans or service members probably feel the same based off of your definition. But when you were young in the Coast Guard, I know that there was a lot of experiences that required you to act in a courageous way. What were some of these early Coast Guard experiences that helped prepare you for some high-pressured situations?
Well, it doesn't start off with a 1-hour training session and then you're good for the rest of your career. I think you have to be thrown into the fire to figure it out. But it's something that I found is that every situation, starting with, I'm going to say, low pressure early in your career, it builds. And it's just a continuous process. It's not one thing or another where there's one thing happens and that's it. I know when I started out, shortly after I graduated from the Coast Guard Academy, probably less than a month later, I reported into my ship. I was breaking in as the officer of the deck underway. And we got a call to escort a tug and barge into Chesapeake Bay because they couldn't handle the weather. It was just too bad. And they didn't have any charts. piece of cake, right? So we're escorting him, and of course, we can't see. It's nighttime. This always happens at nighttime. So you don't really see the tug and barge, but you see the lights. So they're following us, and then they decided they didn't want to follow us anymore, which is kind of odd because that's why we were sent. And then they're yelling, Mayday, Mayday, abandon ship, abandon ship. So then we come up alongside, and they are ships rocking and rolling in the bad weather. They're heeled over 20 degrees. So it kind of looked like they might be sinking. So then we're directed by the operations center, get the people off, but don't do anything with the tugboat. Now, that ignorance part might come in because, wow, this is really cool. This search and rescue stuff is exciting. By the morning, the barge and tug had gone underneath the Chesapeake Bay Bridge tunnel. When the tide came in, it broke the bridge in half. And it's 18 miles from the southern point of the Delmarva Peninsula over to the Virginia Beach area. The other route is 4 hours north to Annapolis, go over, I can't remember the name of the bridge, and then four hours south again. That's a little bit longer commute than 18 miles. So the situation itself didn't present to me pressure as we would talk about it, because I think I was in that ignorance stage. But then came the court case. And being the officer of the deck when this is all going on, or at least breaking in, there's a lot of interviews because the bridge had to be fixed. There's a lot of inconvenience, not quite as bad as the Dolly incident, I don't think, but being prepped. Make sure you understand the difference between I don't know and I don't remember, because if you don't know, you can never know. And something triggers your mind, and then you don't want the lawyer asking you, did you lie when you said you didn't know, or are you lying now when you're making up a story? So I think that was more the pressure that came from the start there. Then next is at the age of 23 years old, I was given orders to be commanding officer of a ship, 15 months out of the Coast Guard Academy. Now, at that age, you go, wow, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Of course, many years later, I was asking myself the rhetorical question, who in their right mind gives command of a ship to a 23-year-old? But I reported aboard and wasn't there for more than 2 or 3 days when we got our first search and rescue case, which ironically was a Coast Guard small boat, 40-footer, on fire. And we got underway. And I had one of the E5's engineers miss movement. And as you know, having been in the Navy, missing movement is a very serious offense. So when we got back into port, it was all over. I hadn't placed on report, and I was going to hold my first captain's mast. Article 15, for those folks who don't know what a captain's mast is. And he started off with, well, the previous commanding officer never thought this was a big deal. Well, it is a big deal. The previous commanding officer was actually relieved of command. And how did they phrase that? For loss of confidence in his ability to command. So not even there a week, and I'm holding the captain's mast. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. And I had to set the record straight that we're going to follow the rules. We're going to follow the regulations. And I had my second in command had 18 years of service, about 40 years old. And here's this little 23-year-old kid holding the captain's mast on one of the crews. And I'll tell you, I felt a lot of pressure to do that, but I felt this was the right thing to do, and I had to do it. Then the next assignment, I went to graduate school and then went off to the Coast Guard Academy as a physics instructor. And we were getting to the midterms, and my cadets, you would think cadets at a military academy, when you say jump, they say how high, and they ask for permission to come down. Not necessarily true. They decided that they really didn't want to take the course. They weren't going to do any work. And we're getting to midterm, and I'm giving like 90% of them D's and F's. And I actually had cadets tell me, the dean's never going to let you get away with this. He's going to make you raise the grades. So they don't have to do the work, and I have to conform to what the cadets are telling me. So I went to the branch chief and talked to him, told him what I was going to do. And they have to attend extra classes. They have to do extra homework. Then if they did all that, then they were allowed to retake the test. And the grade they got would be 1 grade lower than whatever it is that was the score. And they have to take this course seriously. And my boss said, sounds like a plan. Are you ready to take the heat from the dean on this? I said, yes. So while some of these getting started aren't operational high stress pressure systems, pressure doesn't necessarily have to be in the operational mission. It can come from anywhere. And it's like every assignment I had something in there. It builds up. I mean, the perfect storm. Lives are at risk. At one point, I was commanding officer of the ship, we were with Navy Destroyer Squadron. I seized a Chinese ship in the East China Sea. If that doesn't go well, you're going to be on the 6 o'clock news every night for 6 months.
Right.
And before that happened, I had gotten one of those satellite phone calls from the Vice-Commandant telling me the Commandant was out of the country, and this would be a particularly bad time for anyone to be hurt or killed. My first thought isn't any day a particularly bad time for someone to be hurt or killed? There was silence for a second. It's like, oh, good, I didn't say that out loud. And then he said, "Do well, Larry. The eyes of the world are upon you." Except that never made it to the news. And I don't think the U.S. wanted to hurt the relations with China by putting that on the news. But I mean, that's pressure. I was in charge of the Coast Guard operations for the America's Cup races. This is $1 billion event. And you may have guessed, billionaires don't like being told what to do. So I'm going to say that the political heat that came with that, with enforcing regulations, that we were there for the safety of life, property, and the environment, and they're having this $1 billion event, and there are a lot of concerns that we had to do. And I'll tell you, a lot of pressure came under that. And again, that was half operational and half on the beach when it came to the pressure of what's going on. It's just a continuous process. Every mission, every assignment, I think everybody else in the military had, not just me, came under pressure one way or the other. And it just builds and builds. And I guess you get used to it after a while, but you still have to keep going.
I love hearing the stories of your early days in service and how that pressure just continued to compound upon each other. It started in small incremental steps and gradually got larger until, one of the highlights of your early career in the Perfect Storm, nearly 33 years ago now. But there's no way that we can know at 18 or 22 years old when we made these decisions to join the military. So what inspired you to put on the uniform and start patrolling the coast off of our country?
Well, I don't have one of those stories like a lot of other people had. When I was 5 years old, I just knew I wanted to be a Coast Guard officer. Heck, I didn't even know the Coast Guard existed. Well, my father was in the Army before World War II. He was actually in the U.S. Cavalry back when the cavalry really rode horses. And during World War II, my father, all my uncles, they were in the service. So there were plenty of service people in my life, but no one in the Coast Guard. And then when my brother was 2 years older than I was, he was looking to go to college. He wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. And with the Department of Defense academies, you have to get a nomination from a congressman. And my family was not connected to any congressman, so my brother found out there was no nomination in his future. So he gave up on the idea. But one of his classmates, who was in the Boy Scouts, the three of us from the same troop, decided he wasn't going to go to college. He wanted to enlist in the Coast Guard. And so then what in the world is the Coast Guard? Then I found out of its existence. And then I found out that they actually had an academy, and there was no congressional appointment necessary. You apply, and it's all about your academic skills, your leadership skills, and those sort of things. And then they decide who to accept and who not to accept, and you don't no member of Congress required. So I applied and was accepted. Many years later, when I was an instructor at the Coast Guard Academy, if I were sitting on the board, I'm not sure I would have accepted me, but I was glad somebody did back when I applied. And what a good deal. You get a 4-year college education, and you get a guaranteed job for 5 years when you graduate. A lot of people say you get a free education. I would argue that to the ends of the earth. I didn't pay cash, but it wasn't free.
That's what my wife tells me all the time. She goes, we earned our education. We earned that GI Bill. We earned our veterans benefits, even though we didn't necessarily join thinking about that, especially when we were younger, kind of like yourself. It's just like, hey, I want to do this cool job. I want to have this opportunity. And in 1991, you were responsible for leading the rescue missions for what inspired the movie and the book, The Perfect Storm. Can you take our listeners through what that experience was like?
Well, I had the privilege of commanding 4 different classes of ships when I was on active duty. This would have been ship number 3. With that ship, we're home ported in Newcastle, New Hampshire, and typically our patrols would be out on Georgia's Bank with the fishing vessels. boarding fishing vessels to make sure they're in compliance with the safety laws, because commercial fishing is the most hazardous industry in the United States, more deaths per capita than any other industry. We also check for compliance with the fishing laws, making sure they're not catching fish too small, out of season, or where they shouldn't. And then we're always out there in the middle of it for search and rescue. Ships on fire, sinking, fishermen severely injured, need to be medevaced. And that was typical patrols, 6 weeks. And then at the midpoint, you go in for 3 days, take on some fuel, food, catch up on some sleep. As I always said, I'd take my wife out to lunch because she said that was part of my job description. And then we go back out on patrol. Well, for this particular patrol, the weather reports were saying they're expecting 100-mile-an-hour winds and 60-foot seas. There were 3 weather systems converging upon each other, a high pressure system coming down from Canada on the jet stream, a stalled out low over Nova Scotia, and then the extreme low of Hurricane Grace coming up from the Caribbean. And all 3 of them end up in the same place at the same time. Now, there's no computer model to predict what's going to happen, other than we all know when you get extreme high pressure and extreme low pressure, that makes really strong winds, and really strong winds create very large sea. So we're headed out, and all the commercial fishing boats were coming in. These are not guys who are normally afraid of bad weather, but this is just really going to be, much worse than your normal, say, winter storms. And they're headed in. Well, a 32-foot sailboat with 3 people on board is headed off to Bermuda. Now, the skies are blue, the sun was shining, so maybe they're thinking, why should I worry about this? But the weirdness of this storm is storms usually move from the west to the east. This one was going from east to west, coming in the wrong direction. So you're on land and you're seeing blue sky and everything looks good, but the storm's coming at you from the wrong direction. So we don't know this yet, but I anchored behind Cape Cod. We can't stay in port. Patrol break is over. And of course, go through the operations center, let my wife know so she can call the wives on the crew members, and don't worry about everybody. They're safely anchored behind Cape Cod and they're now out in the middle of this thing. Well, about 2 hours later, we do get the call to get underway. It's about midnight, and it's not a good time to call the wife, wake her up and say, start worrying. So we start out on the mission to go after the sailboat. Coast Guard, of course, sent out a Falcon jet first to find it, and then a H-3 helicopter to see if they could hoist the people off the deck. But it's nighttime, it's miserable weather, and the pilot decided it's too much risk. The people don't have any exposure suits on board. They broached, they damaged their rigging, they lost their life raft. They're drenched with the cold ocean water. They're starting to suffer from hypothermia already. And assuming that, the pilot's going to hoist them and we're going to be done. Well, pilots, there's too much risk, because the only way to get them with the sailboat rocking and rolling so bad was to have them jump in the water. No horizon, no exposure suits, cold water. No, not a good idea. He knows we're on the way. So my first decision I had to make was, do we go through the Cape Cod Canal, the short route, to get there as quick as possible? Or do we go the long way around Cape Cod, Nantucket Shoals? Takes twice as long. Instead of getting there at noontime, we get there at midnight the next night. Weather's even predicted to be much worse. Well, short route's usually the right answer, but I'm going to have the whole crew up going large ship, narrow waterway. No one's going to get sleep. People are tired when you start a rescue mission. If I go the long route, people get some sleep. But then we're going to have to deal with nighttime instead of daylight and much worse weather. So I decided to take the short route to get there the quicker. So we get there. And by then, the skipper on the sailboat decides he doesn't want to be rescued anymore. The 2 women didn't think they were going to live through the storm. Skipper decides, no, because you know how the monsters, hide underneath the bed at nighttime, but they come out at nighttime, but then they hide underneath the bed in daytime and you don't even see them. I don't know what it was. Mm-hmm. Feeling of invincibility or whatever. He decides he wasn't want to be rescued. So I had to go to the admiral, the district commander, to have this declared a manifestly unsafe voyage. Terminate it, not his option. So we're going to get him off. So we're going to use our small boat, 6-meter rigid hull inflatable, and this is really bad weather. So not thinking this is a good training opportunity for the new folks who just showed up. So we send the A-team. Instead of having maybe a third-class boatswain as the coxswain, we got an E7 as the coxswain. Instead of having the deckhand being the seaman, no, that's the third-class boatswain who's usually the coxswain. And then E5 is the engineer. So we're sending the A-team to get this. And the boat slides off a wave, lands on the bow of the original hull inflatable, blows out the forward pontoon. Nothing to protect them as they're heading into the sea. Water comes in the boat, standing in the water almost waist deep, engine stalls, engineer restarts it. Not a good idea to continue the try to mission with this. But they did deliver exposure suits to the people on the sailboat, which was the first step that we wanted in case they ended up in the water. Well, now I'm not going to go forward with using our small boat. I'm not putting 3 extra people into a damaged boat. I mean, I'm glad I got the A team on the boat to begin with. So we still had the helicopter, and it's very simple. Jump off the boat and into the water. What? I don't think I'm going to live through this storm. You want me jumping in the water? Well, the helicopter can't rescue him, because if you imagine that the mass of that sailboat rolling back and forth, they can't hoist off the deck. So they hoisted them up. Small boat comes back to the ship. Standard procedure just doesn't work. So then we're not a 32-foot sailboat. We're a 1,600-ton ship. And we're rolling back because this weather was getting significantly worse by the hour. It was marginal when we launched the boat. Now it's just not safe to get them back. So we still had the helicopter, so we just had our crew jump in the water, and helicopter hoisted them, took them back to Coast Guard Air Station Cape Cod. So we're done. We're headed back in. Everything's good. Then we hear on the radio an Air National Guard crew, H-60 helicopter from Long Island, talking to Coast Guard Rescue Coordination Center in Boston. Nothing to do with us. They're going out on their own mission. And it was so far offshore, they needed the Air National Guard helicopter. The H-3 helicopter had a greater range than the H-60, but their helicopters are refuelable, ours are not, so they send a tanker with them. They get out to, as a lone Japanese sailor saying he's taking on water, sinking. They get there, he's not taking on water, he's not sinking, he's scared. This weather's really bad, he wants to go home. His rigging's not damaged because he's not trying to fight the weather. So the pilot decides he can't hoist them. I mean, the weather's even worse. We're really into the worst part of the storm now. And he considered having him jump in the water, but he's not sure he can get him out. You never put someone in the water unless you have a reasonable expectation you can recover him. And his boat's not sinking. He's at less risk if he remains on the boat than if they try to hoist him. So they head back. And that's where they refuel 3 times in midair. They need that 4th midair refueling, but the weather's so bad they can't connect up with the fuel drawer from the tanker. And they tried everything, and now they're running out of fuel. Got one more chance. If they're successful, they fly home. If not, helicopters without fuel take on the property of rocks. And if you drop a rock 5,000 feet, the people on the rock don't make out so well. So turns out we're only 15 miles away. So he calls us. So I only had 2 engines on the line. Didn't need a lot of speed. We're just going back to the anchorage. You get a better ride in bad weather, going slow, and you save some fuel. And so we put all 4 engines on the line, come up to full speed, and start racing to the scene. We're going up and down waves that look like they're as big as mountains. The rudder and propeller keep coming out of the water. We're making 3 knots. 3 knots. You can walk 4 knots. I don't know if you remember the scene in the movie where the actor plays me, gets very upset with the helmsman because he can't steer steady. Goes, mind your helm. The helmsman, Captain Brudnicki, you keep the rudder in the water and the ship would be a lot easier to steer. And propellers don't really do much good if they're not in the water. So we're making 3 knots. And I just assumed that the Coast Guard helicopter that went out there to get them was going to hoist them, and we're going to get turned around. Nope, didn't happen. The helicopter tries to lower in its basket. The wind is so strong, the basket doesn't go down and almost goes back into the tail rotor. They can't rescue him. Now it's up to us. So we finally get on scene and try to make the approach, something I've done, like I'm going to say 1,000 times in real life, in training, on all these different ships. Doesn't work. Just does not work because the weather is too bad. I don't want you to think I'm a control freak. When I say rightful rudder, I expect the ship to go to the right. We're a 1,600-ton cork bobbing in the ocean. You can't fight the weather. So what are we going to do? Well, you have 4 forces acting on you. 2 you control, 2 you don't. You control your propeller, you control your rudder, you don't control the wind, you don't control the waves. So how do we use the weather instead of fighting it? Because we found out it was a losing battle. So headed away from the man in the water, turn sideways, let the waves just push us to the man. So then we start rolling, of course, 55 degrees to one side, 55 to the other. It's 110 degrees. After 45, it's easier to walk on the wall than it is to walk on the floor. So then we get alongside. How do you get the guy out of the water? I'm not putting the boat in the water. Yesterday, before the weather was only a normal winter storm like weather, we damaged the boat. I'm not putting rescue swimmers in the water because I don't know I can get anybody out. So I'm going to have to put my men out on deck. And if you can imagine 55 to one side, 55 to the other side, waves are crashing. A lot of people ask, how big were those waves? And I'll give you the answer. Don't know, but they were really big. Our bridge is 40 feet above the water. We're looking up to the tops of the waves. Weather buoys are recording waves of 100 feet. Were they really 100 feet? Don't know, but I know they're really big. Now, when I put my crew out on deck, I've confidence in the stability of the ship. This ship that I was on was built by the United States Navy in World War II, designed to tow battleships. It's incredibly stable. It has a lot of power. So I knew we were good on that front. But once you put the people out on deck, they could get washed overboard. And so one of the biggest concerns I had was, do I attempt this mission or not? If I do nothing, before the sun rises, the Air National Guard crew is going to be dead. How do you stand there and consciously make a decision to watch somebody die? But if I attempt a rescue and my rescue team are swept overboard by the waves and I can't get them back as a result of my decision, some of my shipmates are killed. Don't do anything, people will die. Attempt to rescue, even more people can die. There's no conservative approach. You can't go into a situation like that hoping for the best, because hope is not a method. You have to understand what risks you're willing to accept and be satisfied you have a plan to overcome those risks. My crew is well trained, high level of skill, a lot of experience. But the key for me is they work together extremely well as a team. And this is a team effort. It's not you're going to put the one guy out there who thinks he's Superman and he's going to save the day. I mean, it is a pure team effort. So we use the cargo net that you may have seen in the movie, but men don't climb up the cargo net like in the movie.
No.
The rescue team snags the man in the water as if he's a fish and then holds the net up on deck. And one thing is, you have to think about this. 160-pound man, 1,600-ton ship. If there's a collision, who loses? So even though we're alongside, I mean, there's still no guarantee that everything is going to come out successful. Well, we got the first one aboard, and that was the injured one of the injured rescue jumpers. He had massive internal bleeding, had broken a lot of bones, ribs, damaged his internal organs. What he needed was a trauma center, not the deck of a rocking, rolling Coast Guard ship out in the middle of the ocean. We got the co-pilot, and when we brought him on board, he had an interesting perspective on his own rescue. He said, when I was on the crest of the wave and the ship was down in the trough, I felt like I was standing on a mountain looking down into the valley at the ship. The man in the water is supposed to look up to the ship, not look down at the ship. And then finally, we rescued the pilot and the flight mechanic. Flight mechanic was not wearing an exposure suit, even though it was required by the conditions of water temperature, air temperature. He was suffering from severe hypothermia. I mean, he's drifting in and out of consciousness, hallucinating. I mean, he only had minutes left in that water, and he could have died from the hypothermia. So even though we're on scene, there's no guarantee that these folks were going to live. And I think if we were going after civilians, they probably all would have been dead before we got there. But these were well-trained military people who know how to try to survive and keep themselves alive so that they can be rescued. And unfortunately, in all of this, when the pilot started having his crew jump out before he ditched into the ocean, and ditch is a euphemism for controlled crash. We never saw anything, never found anything for the first pararescue jumper who jumped out. And unfortunately, he lost his life serving his country on a rescue mission. And that's very sad to me, because they really didn't have to go out there in the first place, because that boat was not taking on water and sinking. But he lived by the pararescue jumper's credo: this we do so that others may live. And if things had been turned around and we were the ones in trouble, it would have been the other way around. That Air National Guard helicopter would have been out there pulling us out of the water. But in all of this, as I've been talking about, there are decision points all along the way. Change any one of those decisions, and you change the whole way the story unfolds. If that first Coast Guard pilot decided to put the people in the water and try to rescue them at night and he couldn't find them. He couldn't rescue them. And somebody was dying, number three is dying from hypothermia while you're trying to rescue number one. Story turns out differently. If I let the skipper on the sailboat have his way and not rescue him until it got nighttime again and the little monsters came out from underneath the bed, we wouldn't have been available to go after the Air National Guard crew. If I had taken the long route so my crew could get some sleep going around Cape Cod, we wouldn't have got there in time and we wouldn't have been available for the crew. If the helicopter pilot decided, gosh, I got one more chance with enough fuel to try to refuel, he would have gone down. Nobody knew it, but in all those attempts to refuel in that turbulent weather, they damaged the fuel drogue so badly that nobody knew about that until he got back to his home base. Even if they connected the fuel drogue, it could not have delivered any fuel to the helicopter. As you know, tankers don't like skimming across the surface of the water. They want to be up high. So that wouldn't have worked out for them. If we got alongside, when normal way of, every time we do something, we do it this way, standard operate, didn't work. What if I gave up? I could have done that. And no one would have faulted me for that because this was such a high risk thing. There was no guarantee you could save anybody. If any of my crew members fell overboard and I couldn't get them back, then people would be looking, why did you decide this mission? I mean, even afterwards, I've heard people at high levels in the Coast Guard, what an idiot that guy was for turning his beam to the sea where he's getting rolling. Didn't you know that's a crazy idea? He should have done it the right way. Well, sorry, folks, you weren't out there. The right way didn't work. So, I mean, there's just so many decisions there, and you have to make the decision on the spot. And it's not like you form a study group and come back 3 weeks later with a 50-page document on what's the right thing to do.
We're writing a research paper on how to perform at sea rescues with 100-foot waves.
When this was all done, the National Search and Rescue School did a case study on us. And I'm not sure you want to be the subject of a case study. But as I was talking about all the decisions, not just mine, other people's as well, when they were all done, they said that what was done doesn't have to be the perfect, doesn't have to be the best way, it just has to be successful. And every time the risk went up, we went up to meet the risk. And then the risk went up again. We went up. We just kept going up, up, up. And not just me, but the other folks, decision makers too. What's the risk? What risks are you willing to accept? What is your plan to overcome those risks? And everybody, I think, has been in a situation like this. You're in a situation that you can't control. You have to make difficult decisions when you don't like any of your options. And unless you're working together as a team, this is never going to be successful. And maybe not to this extent out in the perfect storm, but in everybody's lives, they've come across the same situation.
It's such a riveting and harrowing story. I mean, it's one of the reasons why it was one of the larger hits during the 90s when the book and film was decided to be made, because of all of these decisions that were made that led to a mostly positive outcome. And it also really highlighted just how courageous, not just our Coast Guard, but the people are in terms of helping other people. And so, one, I want to know, what's the approach to making decisions like this? And then if things go askew, do you ever look back and go, oh, I wish I would have done that differently? Do you ever look back on some of these decisions with either regret because hindsight becomes 20/20?
No, I never did. And even when this was all over, being interviewed, well, are you suffering from PTSD after this mission? No, I was not the guy in the water, not knowing if I was going to live or die. So I had no second guessing of any of the decisions that I made. I felt like that I made the right decision at the time. Now, what if one of my crew members died and we couldn't rescue anybody in the water? Well, then maybe I would have had second thoughts on maybe I shouldn't have attempted this because it was impossible. And then I would have been the one that has to look the widow in the eye and say, sorry, I made a bad decision. Your husband's not coming home. And that's something that the commanding officer never wants to have to do. But no, I never second guessed anything I did or had a better idea of a way to do it. It worked. We looked at all the risks and I was satisfied that we could overcome the risks but with absolutely no guarantee whatsoever that it would have a successful outcome.
With everything that you all did during this time, it almost felt like a multi-day operation for going out there and performing these rescues. How did your team and you approach making these critical decisions given these life and death scenarios?
One thing is, before not just the perfect storm, but any mission, I would always gather my key people, in the wardroom, and we would go around the table. What are the concerns from the different department heads, and what are the risks, and how do they think we should approach it? I've always done it that way. And it's really good doing it that way because you get their ideas. If I say, this is what I'm thinking, the last thing I want is, yes, sir, 3 bags full. Let's go that way. Because I might not have the best answer. And most of the time, people going around, they would come up with the same ideas that I had. But now it's coming from them. It's their plan. They have ownership of their plan. And if things aren't going according to plan, they are very vested in it because, well, that's kind of what I recommended. How do I change things? How do I adapt? How do I deal with this new situation that we weren't expecting, or the situation changed? And that's the way I always did things. That's the way I did this for this. But once we're on scene, I mean, there's pretty much no, let's hit the pause button, go back down to the wardroom and and plan again. I mean, you don't have the time to do that. But some of the decisions, I think it's more of a matrix if you do it in your brain. If I get to this point, 2 things can happen. If it goes this way, this is what I'm going to do. If it goes the other way, this is what I'm going to do. And then for each of those could split up into another 2. And you've thought about a lot of the things that can go wrong and what you're going to do. So you're not coming to a decision in 5 seconds. You've already thought about this, and now you're just deciding to do what you knew what the right thing to do is when you got there.
So as these new and unexpected situations were coming up, as the propellers weren't staying in the water, is that how you adapted? You already had contingencies planned, or did you just say, okay, I'm going to rely on instincts from what I was kind of trained to do?
Well, some things like for the propeller coming out of the water, the engineers, it took 5 hours to get there, to go 15 miles. 5 hours.
15 miles.
They sort of had some practice before we got there. And one of the things, as you know, propellers are designed to push 1,600 tons through the water. Once the propeller comes out of the water, there's no resistance. That propeller is just going to spin out of control. The current going to the main motor is going to skyrocket. You're going to burn out your motor, and then we're going to be out there flopping around in the ocean waiting to be rescued ourselves. So part of it was they had to pull back on the throttle once they saw the current getting too high because the propeller's coming out of the water. Wait until they felt the propeller go back in the water, jam it ahead full. Watch, and as soon as the current starts skyrocketing, pull it back on the throttle. I mean, on and off continuously for 5 hours just to get there. That's even before we were on scene. Okay, nothing we could do with the propeller. Either it was in the water or it wasn't. But when we were on scene, and they say this is all hands evolution. We were on scene. You're not looking for a man in the water. Of course, it's the middle of the night. What you're looking for is a head in the water. Take a basketball, throw it out in the middle of 100-foot waves, and then go try to find it. But they did have strobe lights, and it worked out as better at night than daytime because the strobe light flashed against the black sky. And with the waves this high, if we were on the crest of the wave, or the man was on the crest of the wave, we could see him. If there was a wave between us and the man in the water, you couldn't see him. Think of being at a dance with a strobe light, and you see people, and they're like this, and the next time the light flashes, they're like that. You don't see any movement in between. And that's what it was like. So we'd see us, we got to move forward. Did we move forward enough? I don't know. Wait till we can see him again. Oops, went too far forward. Let's back up a little bit. Trying to turn a two-dimensional problem to get there into a one-dimensional problem. And then, oops, we need to back up a little bit more. So, I mean, doing that just adapted and did that as we were there. I mean, it wasn't like thinking. Then you're getting alongside the man in the water, and a gunner's mate was putting up illumination rounds into the sky, trying to keep this timing, and he did a wonderful job. Just before the one illumination round goes out, the next one's lit off. So we were alongside a man in the water. We were trying to make it look as much like daylight as we could so we could get him out of the water. And then, of course, it's dark until you go around to make the approach on the next man. And then, I mean, right down to the cooks. You know, they weren't serving up French fries in the deep fat fryer when this was going on. It was all cold food that we're eating. I mean, everybody had to adapt. Our corpsman, he had to keep these guys alive till we could get them, well, especially the pararescue jumper, to a trauma center. So, I mean, everybody was involved in this one way or the other. And some of the things we had talked about, some of them, good crew knows what we're doing, and this is what they had to do, adapt. I know it comes out of those movies from the war movies on TV, improvise, adapt, and overcome. But it's pretty much true when you're out there on scene.
Yeah, it's definitely an accurate depiction of what's going on because you can run through as many training scenarios as possible, but nothing compares to the real life when it's actually staring you in the face. And you had mentioned earlier the two different civilians that you had, groups of civilians, the fisherman on the non-sinking boat, and then the sailor with his two new friends. One trying to call off a rescue mission, saying, I've got it. And the other one going, I'm so afraid. What role do you think ego or fear play in making our decisions?
Well, I think the skipper on that sailboat was definitely operating off ego. He's like maybe 60 years old. It's his sailboat. He's bigger than the ocean, and he's going to Bermuda. And even after the fact, in the media there, he was criticizing me because he never had to be ordered off his boat. Remember, this started 75 miles south of Long Island. His boat washed up ashore, I think it was in North Carolina. Now, that's the opposite direction of the Gulf Stream.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Yeah, the wind-driven currents from this storm were so strong, it made the Gulf Stream like it wasn't even there. And while he was saying his boat washed up, therefore he didn't have to abandon his boat, well, just because the boat washed up on shore doesn't mean he would have been on it when it washed up on shore. He's in a 32-foot sailboat, and you have 100-foot waves. And I think it's a rule of thumb, when the height of the waves is 3 times the length of your boat, you probably don't belong out there. They didn't have the exposure suits. They could have all been on the boat and died from hypothermia. And the other thing is, do you stay up on deck and risk being washed overboard, or do you go down into the cabin so you don't go overboard? And there have been many cases where people go down into the cabin, and because of the violence motion of the ship, you get bounced around. Your head slams up against the bulkhead or the wall on the ship, and you get a serious head injury and die. So just because his boat washed up ashore doesn't mean he would have been on it and he would have been alive. So I am confident I made the right decision getting the Admiral to declare this a manifestly unsafe voyage. The two women, by the way, didn't think they were going to live through the storm, and they were pretty pleased to be rescued by the Coast Guard.
It really sounds like the ego could have led to death or dire consequences, as well as fear. Like the gentleman that called in a rescue when not needing a rescue, he put people at risk. I feel like we need a very clear mind to make decisions, and oftentimes in the crisis is not the best time to make those decisions. Like if we're feeling like we're in a crisis, if our ego is getting the best of us saying, oh, I can handle any situation, or if we're so afraid that we're just making reflexive decisions in order to save, to preserve our life.
Yeah, one of the other things, in speaking about ego, in the book, the author kind of criticized me because he said I failed to rescue the people on the sailboat. I was the on-scene commander. At my command, I had a ship, 2 small boats, and a helicopter. It's my job to find the least risk method of rescuing the people and taking care of my people in the process. He thought I failed because I didn't continue with my small boat that had been damaged. Now, if I had the same ego mentality, well, I put that boat in the water, I got the helicopter here, but I'm not going to use them. I'm putting 3 more people in a damaged small boat, and I'm going to bring them back aboard the ship. And by then, we were rolling so badly. One of my concerns was the ship rolls in one direction, boat swings out. You roll in the other direction, boat swings back, slams up against the hull of the ship. You could hurt or kill somebody doing that. But if I was operating off of ego, well, I put that boat in the water, and I'm getting it back. No, I abandoned the small boat. By the way, it was never seen again. And when the Secretary of Department of Transportation came to the ship to congratulate the crew on the rescue, one thing he said is, Larry, don't worry about it. You're not going to have to pay for it. If you are interested, that boat cost $52,288 back then. But no, you can't have the ego in there. Boats are cheaper than people. I'm not going to risk lives to save property.
How do you feel like these experiences, Perfect Storm, the ship rescue in China, the Chesapeake Bay incident, how do you feel like these experiences of leading a team in conditions like these shape your views on leadership and teamwork?
I don't know how it shapes. It just evolves. It just evolves. The more difficult situations you get into, the more you learn, the more you have in the back of your mind for other situations when you face them in the future. I mean, it definitely is a learning experience from the day one until the day you retire. It's not like one event, one thing teaches you what to do. I do know one officer who worked for me on one of the ships. He had just come from another ship, and he gets a brand new commanding officer, and he musters up with all his officers in the wardroom. And the first thing he says is, "No one should expect to get a recommendation for command from me because if you screw up, it's going to reflect poorly on me." Wow. I mean, what did you just do to the morale of your entire wardrobe? I don't care how good you are. I don't care how hard you work. I don't care what you accomplish. I'm not going to give you a recommendation of command because if you screw up, it could reflect poorly. That's ego. It's all about him. It's not about developing his crew. It's not about accomplishing the mission. All I can say is that's pure ego. And that's the wrong way to approach things.
It sounds like a lot of your life, your leadership style, at least from the Coast Guard, was really about being able to take care of the next person. But eventually, that career, that military side at least, does come to an end, and we don't find ourselves in situations where we have as much opportunities to continue to perform functions like that. How did you navigate the transition back into civilian life?
Well, I guess when you get to the 20-year mark, as you and every veteran knows, you can retire if you want to. And I got to that point, and I wasn't actively looking for a job. I wasn't even passively looking for a job. If a job happened to present itself to me and I liked it better than what I was doing, I was going to retire and get out and take the job. And many times I was talking with my wife and saying something like, well, at this point, I got to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. And then at one point, my wife came to me and she says, "You got to stop saying that." Why? Well, the kids came to me and they're saying, "Isn't daddy already grown up?" so so then I'm approaching 30 years. And there, by law, I'm going to have to get out. So I still wasn't sure what I was going to do. And then it was then about the time the book came out. Well, when The Perfect Storm happened, I was interviewed a lot because it was a current event. Then it died down. It was just ancient history. The book comes out, brought it back to life. I'm interviewed on TV, radio, newspapers, magazines. And then that died down. And okay, now it's done. Nope, now there's a movie coming out. And it was like round 3. And it came back to life again. And then groups started asking me if I would come and speak about it because I guess I learned based on a true story. There's no resemblance between a documentary and based on a true story. So people started asking me to speak to their groups or their organizations or whatever. And I talked to my boss is a 3-star, and he says, "Hey, accept any invitation you want to accept, decline any invitation you don't want. Just remember, this has got nothing to do with your real job." So I was accepting invitations and speaking here and there, and some of them were local. Every once in a while, I'd have to fly somewhere, which did require my boss's approval. But then the organization would pay for my airfare. I never saw a dime. I mean, they would buy the plane ticket, a car would show up at the airport, pick me up. I'd go to the hotel, and all that would be taken care of. And I always had to file something with the chief counsel to make sure that, because the Coast Guard's accepting the gift, even though I don't see a dime. Well, one day I go back to my office. I got a couple of voicemails and corporation calls and said, "We'd like you to come speak at our annual event, and we want to get the flyer out for it to put you down as a keynote speaker or not. Can you just say yes or no, and then just tell us what your fee is?" Fee? You can get paid to do this? Well, I had always known that there are former presidents and former secretaries of state who get anywhere from 100,000 to $500,000 for 30 minutes talking to people. I didn't know real people did things like this. So I called them up and said, "Yeah, I'm available. I can do that." And they said, "Well, what's your fee?" And I said, "I have no idea." And they said, "Well, this is what we paid the guy last year." "Oh, sounds good to me." And I filled out the paperwork, sent it to the chief counsel, and they get a phone call a day or so later. "Are you nuts? You accept one dime for speaking while you're on active duty. You're going to Leavenworth. You can't do that." I said, "Oh, but we had already accepted." He goes, No. You never got money. The airline got money. The hotel got money. The limo driver got money. You didn't. So then I had to call them back and say, well, sorry, I can't accept the money. If you want to cancel, that's okay. And they said, no, that's okay. We'll let you come for free. So then I said, well, I couldn't figure out what I was going to do. And it's like, I think my second career came and found me. I didn't go looking for it. It just found me.
That's really, really beautiful. And I'm glad that that happened for you, because it sounded like it came reasonably naturally for you. And obviously there was life decisions that had to happen with the family. But now you do continue to share these lessons from your life and from this story as well. What are a few of the key points that you hope your audiences take away from your experiences?
Well, one thing before I go speak to an audience, I always want to talk to somebody at the top, the CEO, the president, or maybe a vice president, or who's ever running the conference or meeting. And I always have questions for them, because while everybody thinks this is an interesting story, especially from the firsthand perspective, some of it's, I'm going to say, not relatable. And in the corporate world, you're trying to get something that relates. And the questions I'll ask them, I'll always ask them, what are the three biggest challenges your company's facing? What are the toughest decisions you have to make? I mean, if it was easy to make that decision, you wouldn't be getting the big bucks. So there's no good decision. It's hard to make those decisions. And if everything's going well in your company, what does good look like? And if things are going bad, what does bad look like? And don't tell me it's the opposite of good. What does bad look like? And I would always ask those questions so that when I'm giving my presentation where I'm telling the story, and of course, the version I gave you was a lot shorter than my normal presentation. But then I put those things in my presentation at various points to make a parallel. I'm not an expert on every industry in the US. I don't know how to solve their problems. But I would put them in various places and bring up, what their challenge is, and then talk about what we were doing, in the hopes that the audience is going to then make the parallel between what we faced, how we solved it, what they're facing, how they solve it. And one time I was at a conference, there's like 1,500 people in the audience. It was a tech company. And after I was done, one of the people came up and says, wow, you really solved, and I should leave out names of corporations, but that particular corporation, you solved that problem. Wow, that was great. First of all, I didn't know the corporation had a problem. And if I did, I would not have had the clue how to solve it. But what I was trying to accomplish was he made a parallel about how we thought about things, how we made decisions, how we did things, and was able to relate that to solving the problem he needed to solve for that other company. So I really helped get them to help me to solve their to get them to solve their problems.
Hmm.
And one time says, I didn't know you know so much about this particular industry. Well, I only knew about 5 minutes worth of information about that industry, but it was all critical information, and it got peppered through the presentation at the right spots, I guess, that they thought I was solving their problems for them, and I wasn't. They're solving their own problems.
Well, it's amazing how many problems are reasonably similar when we look deep enough, right? Like when we sit there and we really examine what's going on, we can find the root of the problems are pretty common. And we know as individuals, we face our own problems and we battle our own storms. And sometimes we need people to come alongside us and help get us out of the water. Right now, we are well aware of the tragic suicide rates among service members, veterans, and first responders. And Larry, I would love to ask you, do you have a message of hope for those that are currently battling the storms in their lives?
I think some of the problems that they're facing is they're not distinguishing between what the symptom is and what the real problem is. And you have to separate those two to begin with. Generally, there's a way out of a bad situation. I mean, there are some that just you can't overcome. It's you, and there's 5,000 guys with guns pointing at you, and you got nowhere to go. But that's not what's happening today now that they're out of the service. What can be changed? What can't you change? Things aren't as bad as most people think they are, but someone facing that situation is going to tell me, you don't know what I'm facing. So you can't really say that, because for them, it's very real. Some people I've encountered, they say they have trouble making a decision on what they have to do. And what I found is they know what they have to do. The problem is they're having trouble deciding to actually do what they know they should do. That's where the decision-making problem is. It's not deciding what to do. And it's a difficult situation, so there's no great answers. And again, you just pick the best of the bad answers. Not making a decision is a decision. And if things are bad and you're deciding to let them continue to be bad, they're never going to get better. You have to make that decision. And I know there's some vets who things happened when they're on the other side of the world and it's going to haunt them for the rest of their life. They had to do something. They knew they had to do something. They did it, and now they're having trouble living with it. Well, you can't change the past. You just can't change the past, but you can change your future. What do you have to do to move on? You're never going to undo what happened, but what do you have to do to move on? And for most vets, they've been in this situation where their team's in trouble and they've got to do something to help protect their team. And they'll do anything to protect their buddies. They will. And now they're home and they're maybe being haunted by that past that they can't change. Well, you got a different team now, your family, your friends. Keep that same attitude you had when you're on the other side of the world about you're going to do anything for your team to protect them. And one of those things is go get some help. There are many resources available. Protect your team. Don't make them live without you. Focus on your family and your friends and how you taking your life is going to affect them and hurt them.
Sometimes getting help requires so much courage. And Larry, thank you so much for your words of wisdom today. Thank you for sharing your experiences, and thank you for being a guest here on the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast.
Thanks for having me. I hope some of this was useful.
Absolutely. And how can people find and connect with you?
Well, it's very easy. I'm on the internet. You could go to brudnicki.com, but nobody can spell Brudnicki. But perfectstormsolutions.com. I had to come up with a name for the company. And part of that is the things that helped us save lives when it comes to leadership, teamwork, risk management. What was a solution during the perfect storm is a solution to just about anything anybody's facing in the corporate world or their personal life. So that's why I came up with perfectstormsolutions.com.
Well, you've got some amazing solutions that you can offer to people. Again, thank you so much, Larry. And for our listeners, remember, you can also catch the 1 Mile, 1 Veteran podcast on Reese Across America Radio, ready for you on platforms like iHeartRadio, Odyssey, and the TuneIn app.